What's up, y'all? This is Bud Elliott here on the Cover 3 podcast YouTube page. Just doing our daily or weekly, rather, Cover 3 lunchtime hangout. Really appreciate everybody tagging in here and saying what's up. I'll let a couple people get in before we really get going. And today I'll go to about, 10 till or so. And so we'll do about a 35-minute chat. Should be a good time. Anyway. Make sure you guys hit that like and subscribe button right down there. Turn those notifications on if you want to, and we'll see. We'll see how many times we pop up in surprise fashion. Trying to get this channel to 10,000. We're at 8,600 as of this morning. Pretty happy with the growth, but I know that Cover 3 is going to grow quite a bit more. And today, we got a really good question last week. It's something I want to tackle, and basically, it's time for Hate and Ask Bud, right? Let's nitpick these college football teams. Let's figure out, okay, where could they stumble? Where could they fall? Not in terms of like which team could they lose to, but diving into it, where do you see opportunities for each team to screw up potentially is what I want to focus on today. Now, I'm going to go with the odds from DraftKings as far as the likelihood to make the playoffs. If you have an issue with the order in which these teams appear, take that up with DraftKings. The only addition I made is that DraftKings does not have odds on Michigan making it. And I do think that Michigan has a chance to make the playoff, albeit certainly slimmer than maybe some of the ESPN projections would have. So I did go ahead and throw Michigan in there at the tail end, but I just went with the odds from DraftKings to determine the order of teams that I'm going to discuss here. After we do the main question, right, we will we'll go ahead and take some of y'all's live questions. I did make the chat subscriber only, so if you're trying to chat, just hit the subscribe button, and then you can chat with us. Kind of cool. Hopefully, we'll get our subscription numbers up even more on the channel. The other housekeeping note is that if you guys watch my Sunday show typically, and you want all the early bets, there will be no live broadcast this weekend for me because I'm going to be on vacation, but I will still make my numbers and I will send it out to my email list. If you want to get on the email list for the Sunday morning, my power rankings, bet numbers, and whatnot, go ahead and just email, as you can see right there, budelliottcfb@gmail. If you want to get added to that list, it's free, but I do send it out on days that I don't do the live show. So if you want to get on that, just email that. That's cool. So with that, let's go ahead and jump in here. First team we're going to talk about is Georgia. I looked into Georgia this morning. I think I've watched pretty much every single play of every Georgia game that's done in garbage time. Ultimately, this is a damn good football team, man. Their margin for error on offense is just really, really pretty good. Because the defense is just so dominant. It's number one, in my opinion, by a mile over everybody else. Like the gap between Georgia and the number 2 team defensively is like the gap between number 2 and like number 13, at least in my rankings. So, that's pretty, like, with that, that's kind of the caveat for what I'm about to say. They don't have to be a great offense in order to win a national title, in order to make the playoff and have success in the playoff. But I will note here a couple things. Number one, I am skeptical that Stetson Bennett can win a national championship. That doesn't mean he can't, but I do think they need to get JT Daniels back. This is something I have consistently said. I think there's a reason they continue to rest JT Daniels. I'm not saying he's ready to start right now and that they're resting him, but if I was Kirby Smart, I would continue to use an abundance of caution. But you need to get him back. You need to get some of those receivers back and healthy. You do need to get this pass game a little bit better. And you might say, hey, Bud, they rank really well in the pass game numbers. They do right now. They absolutely do. You are correct. I cannot dispute that, right? They're third in passing success rate. They're decently explosive in the pass game right now. But we have not really seen Georgia be in a situation this year where it had to rely on its pass game to score points, except for one time. And in that situation, it really couldn't do it against Clemson. So I went ahead and pulled the numbers of the 2 top 25 defenses per SP Plus that they faced. Actually, the 2 top, 35? I think they've only faced 2 top 35 defenses so far this year. Which, look, Georgia's had a tough schedule. I'm not trying to dispute that, but I'm just looking at the quality of defenses, that they've faced so far. And against Auburn and Clemson, 36 of 51, but for only 366 yards. So not a great yards per attempt. Not that I would expect you would have a crazy yards per attempt anyway against good defenses. That would be kind of silly. There's a reason why they are good. And a 2-to-1 touchdown to interception ratio. We have not seen, it's not that they can't do it. It's that we have not seen this team this year successfully throw the football when it absolutely had to have it. I think you knew Arkansas and Kentucky and Auburn and those teams really couldn't score on you. We didn't necessarily know that against Clemson, although it did prove to be true. But what happens if this team gets down in the game? Have we seen Georgia have to play with a significant deficit? Can they throw their way back into a game? I don't know. They may not have to, right? Ultimately, there may just be such good defense here that they don't have to. The other thing I would say is I have a little bit of concerns about this secondary. I think it's really good. Is it great? Does it have to be great? I don't know that it actually has to be great, right? Georgia's defensive front is so damn good with Jordan Davis and the kid from Apopka and Devontae Wyatt and Nolan Smith and Nakobe Dean and just the list goes on and on and on. We talked about this. The best player on Florida State was a backup on Georgia's defense. One of Florida's best defenders. I'm not going to say their best defender. Got corrected by the Gator board, rightfully so, for making that comment a couple weeks ago. One of Florida's best defenders in Brenton Cox. One of Miami's best defenders in Tyreek Stevenson. Arguably Ole Miss's best defender in Otis Reese. We're all backups for Georgia. And they transferred and are elite players relative to the team quality at their new destinations. That Georgia defense is crazy loaded. But what's the best passing game Georgia's seen? Clemson has not thrown the ball well against anybody so far. Kentucky, there's a lot of noise about Kentucky's new passing offense. But to be honest, their drop back game is bad. Like it's not good. When they don't throw off play action, they're really not that good. Their overall numbers anyway are really, really not strong, to be frank. And Will Levis is fine. 13-6 touchdown interception ratio, though. Didn't do a whole lot against Georgia. Arkansas, again, their just pure drop back game is pretty poor. Who else has Georgia played that I think would maybe qualify as an offense that actually scares you? So, again, it's not that I lack confidence in Georgia's secondary here. Auburn's offense actually, I think, is a lot more hyped than it is good right now. I actually have their offense outside the top 40 in my ratings. So, still kind of skeptical on that Auburn offense. South Carolina can't play. Vandy can't play. You see my point here? Again, it's not so much a concern as it is an unknown. We have not seen Georgia throw the ball effectively when it had to throw, but it's been in so few spots that they've actually been asked to do that. And we really have not seen Georgia be tested by what I would say is a good passing offense. So not really concerns there, but I do want to start with Georgia because they're the one team that Vegas kind of thinks is a mortal lock for the playoff. Anyway, just my opinion on that. All right, the next team, next best playoff odds is actually Oklahoma. And Oklahoma, my thoughts on this would have been very different 2 weeks ago. And now my concerns for Oklahoma are a little bit different. With Oklahoma, I think a lot of their offensive problems actually are fixed with Caleb Williams, assuming that he stays healthy. One of my main concerns with Oklahoma this year has been the run game. They have not been a good running football team. I don't think the offensive line is nearly as good as it was. And honestly, their offense is still really damn good. I have it as the second best offense in the country. But it's not a super, super elite offense compared to what it is at times. And I think part of the reason for that was some of the run game stuff. Spencer Rattler is not really a threat in the 11-man run game. When you have a poor offensive line, you can help some of that either by being really good on the RPO stuff, with which Rattler has kind of mixed results with, or by doing more of the running quarterback stuff, which Caleb Williams can do. And defenses really do have to respect his legs in the 11-man run game. So, let's see how this looks. Well, last two games, the run game looks absolutely awesome. The holes are bigger. I think the backside is being held more by Caleb Williams and the threat of his legs. And they're also hitting explosive pass plays at a higher rate as well with him in there. Granted, they've played TCU and Texas, two defenses that I don't think are necessarily great. But, that's encouraging. Here's what scares me about Oklahoma. And this is a fixable problem, but it is a problem. I spoke with Colin Kennedy about this morning. I know I spoke with a couple of y'all as well on Twitter just to get a good feel for what's going to happen here. Oklahoma right now, I think their defensive front is really pretty nice. Their havoc numbers are all pretty damn good. Their defensive line in particular is really, really strong. They have some guys up there who will play in the NFL. Their linebackers are okay. But these pass defense numbers on the back end are horrendous. And if these guys in there right now are the dudes who they're going to roll with, I think Oklahoma will lose 2 more games in the regular season. Like that final stretch that they have is not navigable if they have to continue to play with these guys right now. Baylor, Iowa State, at Oklahoma State, starting on November 13th. However, the next 2 weeks, October 23rd, this weekend at Kansas, and then they host Texas Tech, and then they get a bye. Oklahoma has, about 25 days to get healthy in the secondary because there are major problems right now. So Woody Washington's out, DJ Graham is out, Delarian Turner-Yell is out, and even backup Jeremiah Crudell is out as well. Oklahoma's having to move some safeties to corner right now to counteract this. But I spoke with Colin Kennedy of our Oklahoma 24/7 Sports site, and he told me there's actually a pretty good chance that all those guys get back by the stretch run. If Oklahoma gets those guys back, I'm not saying that they're going to have an elite pass defense. I don't think they will. But if you've watched them the last couple of weeks, they were just getting guys mossed consistently over and over again. And that's just not something that you can win with if you're getting mossed like that. If those guys come back, then this could be a really, really good football team and a legitimate national title contender because you will score points, I think, on pretty much anybody with Caleb Williams in there at quarterback. And he's played 6 quarters of football, so I certainly could be wrong on that. I'm sure some of those defensive coordinators down the stretch, Jim Knowles, Aranda, Iowa State, those guys can all play some defense. Somebody will trip him up. When that trip up comes, Oklahoma needs to make sure that they're giving up sort of in that like 28 to 35 range and not 50. Right now with this current secondary, I think they could be giving up a 50 burger because guys I understand the coverage bus when you have the backups in there, but these backups right now just can't play. They're literally getting mossed several times a game, and 50-50 balls against the current Oklahoma secondary are not 50-50. They're like 65-35, 70-30. And so to me, that is a problem for the Sooners. But if they get those guys back, like Colin told me, there's a decent chance they will. Well, then it's a whole new ballgame. Because with that defensive front, if you have some guys who can play the ball, you're going to get some turnovers most likely, even though we know turnovers have a large luck component. You at least have to be in position and playing the ball to get interceptions, typically. Anyway, that's my take on on Oklahoma. Next up, surprisingly here, and again, blame DraftKings for this order. It's not something that I think is necessarily correct, but they actually have Alabama at minus 160 to make the playoff, plus 140 to miss. I did take a piece of that plus 140 this morning to miss, and we'll be adding that to the Bud's Bets column after the show. Do you guys think Alabama is more likely than not to make the playoff? Like a minus 160 line is curious to me. It implies either that a 2-loss Alabama has a more significant chance of making the playoff than I expect that it does, or it implies that maybe they'll be favored over Georgia. And right now, I have Georgia favored by 2.8 over Alabama on a neutral site. You can argue the Georgia Dome might not be a neutral site, probably have a couple more Georgia fans there, but Bama fans don't exactly return their tickets to ticket allotment. So it's not much of a home field, if at all, maybe like 0.1, maybe 0.2 if you wanted to go there and do that, but I really kind of doubt it. And I would not make that adjustment. So let's go ahead and dive into Alabama here a little bit. A couple things stand out, and they're just sort of stuff that Nick Saban teams typically don't mess up, but they're there's some drive killers on the offensive side, and then on the defensive side, which is where I want to start. Alabama has some issues that have been exposed at times this year. They are not allowing the explosive play, right? That is true. They are doing a really good job of not allowing especially through the air. Their explosive pass defense is really strong, and their explosive rush defense overall, despite what happened against A&M, is still elite. However, I do want to note that their short and intermediate pass defense this year is just kind of leaky. They allow more completions in that short and intermediate area than they typically do. Nick Saban teams are not really exposed like this. They're still getting off the field reasonably well on 3rd and long, but normally like 3rd and 6 against the Nick Saban defense, you're off the field. You're punting or you're turning it over. They're blitzing you. They're forcing the ball out of your hand. They're playing that tight man match coverage, and they're getting off the field. This year, though, that's just not been the case. Florida was able to throw the ball on them okay. Zach Calzada threw the ball on them all right in those situations. They handled Ole Miss well, much to their credit. They handled Miami, but they're just not elite in that short and intermediate pass coverage range right now. And that is something that is allowing opponents to stay on the field more, right? If that makes sense. Like they normally force more 3 and outs than they do currently. And that's just something that concerns me. I don't know how many other teams on their schedule can take advantage of that. Georgia throws the ball fairly well in the short and intermediate, so potentially something there. But yeah, they are allowing too high of a completion percentage this year. I think if we're looking for things that could trip them up, that could prevent them from actually getting back to the playoff and winning it all, I think some of it is their linebacker, to be honest. Like I've seen some. I thought Bama's linebackers are going to be better this year in pass coverage than they've been. And maybe that's on me for not properly evaluating them, or maybe that's on them. Maybe they're not playing to their potential. Maybe that's coaching. Maybe that's some combination of all three. But they've not been quite as good. Now, on the offensive side, their overall numbers are still really, really strong, to their credit. I know they're a top 5 defense or top 5 offense in pretty much all of the power metrics, but there's just a couple things they do. And we talked about this with Ohio State after the loss to Oregon, right? Ohio State put up 600-something yards in that loss, which is crazy. But ultimately, they didn't do some of the small things, and look, to respond to the comments here, I know they have multiple injuries at linebacker. If they can get some guys back healthy at linebacker, or maybe some of their starters get healthier, that can certainly help. Will Anderson has been an absolute freak on the defensive side, rushing the passer. They could use a little more pass rush depth, I think. But overall, like Bama's pressure rate is still pretty good. They're still top 15 in the country in sack rate. It's not that bad. Let's talk about Bama's offense, though, because there's some small things that this offense does that I think are holding it down a little bit and which could trip it up in games, although I'm pretty bullish on this offense overall. One thing is that their 3rd and short, especially running the football, has been really poor. Notably, they had some 3rd and shorts down in the red area against Texas A&M and against Florida, 2 games, which I think they should have lost. And I mean, obviously one of them they did. Their stuff rate allowed in that area of the field is very high. They're not converting 3rd and short running the football very well. Their 3rd and short conversion rate passing the football is a little bit better. So maybe they need to trust Bryce Young to throw more in those situations. But I also am concerned at the number of times they are allowing free runners at the quarterback, right? I would define free runners as unblocked guys who are not accounted for who are accounted for in the protection scheme, but they just don't get blocked. So it's either an Olay or some type of protection bust. I know Florida was able to scheme some of those open. A&M was able to scheme quite a few of those open. And that is concerning. Like the number of plays where Bryce Young just has absolutely no time to throw because there's immediate pressure in his face is a bit problematic to me. And I think that's something quite obviously here. There's a couple teams left who can do this to you. Auburn has a pretty damn good defense. They could create free runners, I think, on Bryce Young. Georgia absolutely can create some free runners on Bryce Young. And those are difficult things to deal with as an offense. We really saw that in the A&M game. A&M kind of schemed up and gamed those protections in a way that you typically don't see with an Alabama offensive line. They are actually outside the top 100 in pressure rate allowed so far this year. Now, to Bryce's credit, he gets rid of the ball better than that pressure rate implies, and he doesn't take a whole lot of sacks relative to the pressure rate. But here's something else. Teams are generating this pressure on Alabama without having to actually send a whole lot of blitzers. That to me is concerning. Bama is like bottom third in blitzes faced per dropback, and that's not great, right? That's certainly problematic there because that means you're able to play against this Alabama offense with more coverage defenders on the back end, and that has really impacted Alabama's explosive play rate this year. It's not nearly what it was last year or even in some previous years. Another good indication of this is how often are you scoring explosive plays, touchdowns, first downs on first down, right? Normally that's a great down to throw on. And Alabama last year just absolutely crushed people throwing the football on first down. This year, they are still throwing the football on first down, right? Like, it's not like they're not trusting Bryce Young to do it. So what's happening? Well, what we're seeing here is that teams are playing more too high against Alabama. They're not quite as scared of the run game. And because they're not having to blitz, they can play more of those defenders back. And ultimately, that is preventing Alabama from having some of the explosive plays that it would normally have. How do you fix this? You got to find a way to run the ball a little bit better. You got to become more deadly, throw in some of those short passes, I guess. But ultimately, you got to get your protections right up front. New offensive line coach, new offensive coordinator, a lot of new pieces there. Certainly some issues were expected. I think there's a reason Danny Cannell bet the under on the 11.5 wins for Alabama this year, which is looking really smart right now because they could even lose again before they get to the Dome, although I don't think that's super likely. But you see these like little issues that a lot of these do come back to the offensive line, and I think some of the coaching and the issues with some of the chemistry on the offense right now. Still a really good team, still easily a top 5 team in college football for me, maybe even a little bit better on the power rankings. But again, this segment is all about nitpicking and trying to accomplish that. All right, we're only 3 teams deep, so some of these, the less likely you are to make the playoff, the less in depth I'm going to go on you in this video. Hope you guys are enjoying this. Next week, I'll have a little more time. Maybe we'll go a little more like pure mailbag format. Cincinnati is the last team that's basically a coin flip to make the playoff on DraftKings. To be honest, guys, there's very little to improve on here with Cincinnati. This team has been totally dominant in almost all of its games. I think there are some game script situations, some alternate realities with what if Indiana doesn't get that targeting foul? Does Cincinnati come back to win that game? I don't know, maybe. In the final 20 minutes, Cincinnati's offense looked like absolute world beaters. So potentially they do, but also potentially they don't, right? That was a major – I'm not a big momentum guy, but certainly something happened there in that ball game. Oh, my Apple Watch is charged. Cool. But a couple things that again, this is sort of like Georgia, where it's not that you don't think they can do it, but they just haven't had to do it yet, or they've had to do it in such limited sample set. The quality of defenses that this Cincinnati team has played so far, it is not great. It's not terrible. But I will note that they have played teams that have almost exclusively played them with zone coverage. Cincinnati has not faced a team with good corners that can play really good man-to-man coverage so far this year. And to be honest, I don't think they're going to face one in the regular season. It's not like SMU can play good man-to-man defense. They don't have to play Houston this year due to a kind of a quirk of the schedule. They're like almost dead last in the nation in terms of facing man-to-man coverage. Not in success rate against man-to-man coverage, but in terms of just actually seeing it. Teams, for the most part, do not play man-to-man coverage against Cincinnati, probably because they don't have the athletes to do so. But this is why I would give them very little chance against Georgia in round one. If Georgia makes the playoffs and they do draw Cincy, which if you're Georgia, that's probably the team you want to play. Georgia can play man-to-man against you if they feel like it. We'll see if Oklahoma can when they get their starters back. Ohio State we'll get to in a second. That's really the main thing I have concerns with. Here's the other one. Cincinnati is 3 of 8 on field goals this year. They have not been in close games, so it really has not mattered all that much. But what happens if they actually don't have a kicker? 3 of 8 is pretty terrible, guys. They will probably not be able to blow everybody out, right? So, yeah. All right, let's go ahead and go to Ohio State here. Ohio State, for me, it's all about the defense, right? This offense is elite. I have this offense as the best offense in the country, and it's not close. I think it's the best offense by a country mile. So I'm going to focus here on the defense. Kerry Coombs is no longer the defensive play caller, even though he is the defensive coordinator. They've had a bye week. They've had a couple tomato can opponents. They're going to have a couple more weeks to get right. How much scheme can they install? I do think that ultimately Ohio State, and I said this after the Oregon loss, and I don't think that Coombs would have been the DC this year if 2020 was a non-COVID season. But they do not play enough diverse coverages and concepts defensively, in my opinion, relative to their fundamentals. If you're going to play a very small number of coverages, you need to play faster. You need to be extremely sound fundamentally. You need to play at a really high level. You need to tackle super well, etc. Ohio State so far has not done this. They don't have quite the level of difference maker up front this year that they have in the past, but they're still really, really good against the run. The issue is that people are able to create open looks against them in the pass game with ease. Oregon's offense has not looked good at all, basically in any other game this year. It's just the Ohio State game. In fact, if you pull the Ohio State game out of Oregon's power rankings, and you shouldn't do that, but at times I do like to look at kind of the median performance as opposed to just the overall, because certainly, for instance, Minnesota has to own that 30-point upset against Bowling Green. But if you don't kind of normalize your power ratings a little bit, I think there's some problems there. With Ohio State, their defense is a real issue. If they don't get it fixed, we've seen better defense in recent weeks, but then again, they've played Rutgers, which is a terrible offense, and Maryland was already down to Moss, and then they also lost Jerry and Jones early in that game, the receiver from my neck of the woods down there in Fort Myers, Florida. Shout out 239. So, or excuse me, not Jerry and Jones, Jayshon Jones. Sorry. If they keep giving up 3rd and longs and these open looks that are just schemed against them because they're in predictable coverages, they're not going to be able to get to the playoff. But if they get some of that fixed, if they're able to install a little bit more scheme, able to execute a little more diverse defenses and play with greater confidence within those schemes, maybe they won't squander the best offense in college football. All right, a couple more here. We are moving pretty fast. This thing I've got about, 7 to 10 minutes left. Pitt minus 1,000 to miss the playoff. That's actually the next best odds over Michigan State, over Oregon, over Iowa, over Oklahoma State, and over Michigan. Well, Michigan doesn't have odds right now, but I would assume over Michigan as well. Look, Narduzzi's defense has always been about high success rate and preventing the down-to-down success, and they will trade off a little bit. And this is going back to his days at Michigan State. They will allow you to hit some explosive plays. This is my one thing with Pitt. Well, actually, I have two, but I'll get to it in a second. They allow so many explosive plays. It's just not sustainable at this level to allow this many big plays against your defense. You need to be able to just feel comfortable with the 10-point lead at times. And Pitt, they really struggle to hold leads this year because they do give up so many big plays. And because the other reason here, they just can't run the ball at all. This offense is entirely Kenny Pickett slinging it around. For Pitt, what's interesting here is they've played a somewhat comparable strength of schedule to I don't want to say something comparable. Ole Miss has played a tougher strength of schedule. Maybe not by leaps and bounds, but certainly tougher. Pickett's numbers are better than Matt Corral's numbers, but he's not getting any Heisman love. I'm not really sure that he should, but if Pitt runs the table and Pickett is the only thing that offense has going for it because their run game is just terrible, who knows? It's possible that maybe he gets some Heisman love. They can't run the ball at all, and they give up explosive plays all the time on defense. But their defense does get off the field. They get a ton of 3-and-outs because, again, they're selling out for all these tackles for loss and try to deny completion. So when they do screw up, they screw up to the tune of like a 3-run homer. All right. So Michigan State minus 1,200 to miss the playoff. That's the next best odds to go. They got to find a way to play some pitch and catch. Michigan State has been extremely explosive on offense this year. They've done a great job with Kenneth Walker. They have some real threats at receiver on the explosive basis. But, guys, when it comes to 3rd and 5, they can't do it. They are just not able to stay on the football field in converting these 3rd and mediums, and they just can't play pitch and catch. Their throw game is too inconsistent. If they're going to trip up, that's the way it happens, unless they just keep getting pick sixes or punt return touchdowns, which, look, I'm Mr. Michigan State this year. I bet them over their 4.5. I put out the video saying I thought they would make the playoff, I thought they would make a bowl game, but they do not throw the football at a competent enough level this year so far to make the playoff without a lot of luck continuing. That's just my take on that. Oregon, let's go there real quick. Minus 1,600 to miss. That's the next best odds to make the playoff on DraftKings. Pass defense is actually pretty bad outside the top 100 in almost all the opponent-adjusted passing metrics, which is kind of crazy considering, think about who Oregon has played so far. They have played Ohio State, which is going to mess up your metrics, but again, these are opponent-adjusted. And they've played who? Okay, Fresno can throw on you. That's a good passing offense for sure. Stony Brook? No. Arizona? No. Stanford? Not really. Cal? Definitely not. Man, Oregon's pass defense is super suspect. The other thing that scares me here that could trip them up, that could prevent Oregon from maybe running the table, because obviously if Oregon only has one loss, they're going to go to the playoff. The thing is, these power ratings see Oregon losing at least one more game in the regular season, if not 2 more. And that doesn't even count the conference championship game. They kind of have this weird inability to hit explosive plays through the pass game. They're not terrible throwing some of these RPOs and moving the chains, but they just don't hit the ball over the top with any consistency. All right, going fast here again. But a great question. If you guys have a question you think could take up a whole show, at least drop it in. Let me know. I guess we're not going to get to a whole lot of listener questions today, unfortunately, but I hope you all have enjoyed this hangout. If you have, please do make sure to hit that thumbs up. Again, no live show this weekend for me on Sunday because I'm going to be on Little Baby Moon with my wife at the beach, but I will have my numbers made. She's going to go to the spa that morning. So I will just email it out to my list. If you want to get on that list, it's budelliottcfb@gmail.com. Let's hit Iowa here, and I just have one word: offense. I have them outside the top 90 in basically all the categories I care about. They're terrible. They can't run the ball. They can't throw the ball. We've said this basically every single week. I had, to kind of steal that crypto term, diamond hands, with my Iowa take. It was great. They're good on defense. They're lucky turnover-wise, and their offense is just dreadful. They actually do get it. I was trying to find something nice to say about Iowa. They get into decent, down and distances for 3rd downs, but then they don't convert them, so it doesn't really matter. Okay. Oklahoma State, minus 1,800 not to make the playoff. I've actually bet on Oklahoma State a couple times this year and have enjoyed when they've won for me. But offensive consistency is just not there. They hit some explosive runs. They don't stay ahead of the chains really at all. It's a good defensive team. It's not a good enough defensive team to keep winning games like this. Ultimately, they've had a lot of injuries on offense, so I do think that if we're going to talk about some of these teams getting injured players back, like Georgia with the receivers and the quarterback, Oregon getting some of those guys back on defense. If Oklahoma State continues to heal up, specifically at the receiver position, maybe I'd entertain an argument that they could run the table. But ultimately, Spencer Sanders his passing success just in his career does not suggest to me that he can do that, right? He just cannot play pitch and catch well enough. Last one here. Michigan, passing game. They don't play pitch and catch very well either. Now, I know they lost Ronnie Bell for the season. I think they're getting Roman Wilson back at some point. It doesn't look like it's season ending, but obviously he did miss the game against Nebraska. Northwestern is pretty damn bad, so I would expect Michigan to handle them this weekend, I guess, fairly easily. But what game does Michigan have coming up where they might have to actually be able to throw the football with some level of consistency? Oh, let's take a look. Oh, they go play at Michigan State. And then they also play at Indiana. And Indiana's a team that actually could beat Michigan this year, I think, if Michigan can't start playing pitch and catch a little bit better. What are they here? Yeah, they're outside the top 100 in passing success rate. Granted, they've played some decent passing defenses. Washington could play some pass defense. So can Wisconsin. Nebraska actually has a fairly good pass defense so far this year. But just not good enough throwing the football right now. Run game is mostly fine. I want to know what happens when Michigan is not able to hit the explosive pass play, because their passing consistency is a little bit of a question. All right. The other part that I have with Michigan here is, and I tried to figure out why this is. I went back and I watched some of their key plays this year. You can kind of filter out by win probability added. So Michigan this year they have an elite pressure rate, but they're not turning these pressures into sacks. And I don't think they've actually played quarterbacks who can make you pay for that, right? Like, I think the quarterbacks they've faced have really been bothered by that pressure pretty consistently. You saw it with Martinez at Nebraska. Wisconsin can't throw it. Rutgers can't throw it. Washington definitely couldn't throw it at that time of year. Western Michigan was basically a cupcake at that point. And Northern Illinois is not a team that can throw the ball. Michigan has not played good passing offenses this year in a pretty dramatic way, right? What happens if they don't turn those pressures into sacks against better teams? Are those teams able to maybe challenge them deep a little bit more? Are they able to block it up more a little bit and hit the ball over the top? That's a question I have for Michigan. It's something that could trip them up. They will play some teams that can hit some explosive pass plays coming up. Michigan State, again, we just spoke about them, not consistent with the passing game, but they can hit some explosive passes. Penn State, if Clifford's back, we'll see if he is, can be explosive through the air. Maryland, I think the numbers say yeah, but I'm a little skeptical on that given the injuries that they currently have. And in the final game of the year, a game you cannot lose if you hope to go to the playoff, Ohio State. Can CJ Stroud handle pressure? I think so. Yeah. And he can throw the ball over the top. If they don't fix that a little bit, if they don't turn those pressures into sacks a little bit more, they will end up dropping a game. Anyway, that's kind of your Hate and Ask Bud 40 minutes. I think we have not a whole lot of time left. Guys, I really appreciate the time. If you took the lunch break with me, enjoy it. I'll go back and look through the chat to find some good questions for next week. And next week, I don't want to go just totally pre-planned show. I want to kind of do a little more free-flowing conversation. So my apologies for not getting to as many of these today, but I did enjoy doing this with y'all. Hopefully you got something out of the video, and maybe we'll chop this up into some VODs and be able to create some more content out of it. Got another meeting I got to bounce to. Some exciting things coming for the 24/7 Sports Podcast Network. Again, just click on the podcast button on 24/7 Sports to find a podcast for your favorite team. I know we got some Tennessee fans in here. I know our Vols 24/7 podcast is really good. Our Michigan Insider podcast is absolutely tremendous. Those guys just totally kill it. We also have national shows, the Late Kick podcast, College Ball Daily, the College Ball Recruiting podcast. Got a great UCLA show. Honestly, we have great shows for pretty much all the teams that we discussed today, and I'm proud of what our network is doing. So anyway, if you guys want a little more team content coverage, go check them out. And I'll speak to y'all, I guess, tomorrow. We record 11:30. But, somebody can I fix the corners so the colors are alternating? It's driving me crazy for a few weeks. I will consider that. I think CBS is coming up here to redo my office. The problem I have is that we walled in this little loft I have, as you can see, And this is only like 6 foot tall, and I'm 6'2". So with that, it's weird. Like the bookshelf look kind of looks funky. It's a little weird. So I'm gonna have one of the studio architects come up here and work with it. I got these at Hobby Lobby and put the poster board up and put the panels on there with that. So yeah, we'll work on that. And guys, we'll check y'all later. Thumbs up, like, and subscribe.